Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question, Mr. Girton, thank you for coming and testifying before the committee. When I read the GAO report's recommendation to the service, and then also the service's advance notice of proposed rulemaking, so it seems like the service now is, as you pointed out, is finally addressing the problems that the GAO first uncovered in 2003 and again in 2007. Is that it? So,
yes, there's been a lot of unprecedented development going on in the country. There's been a lot of interest in moving forward on a lot of projects. There's a lot of emerging technologies. The time is very ripe for the Fish and Wildlife Service to partner with industry and promulgate these regulations for certainty moving forward.
I think the point that I'm also, and while you didn't mention it much in your oral testimony, in your written, that this is a problem that's a real problem. It's not trying to create a problem. It's been documented by the GAO, and I recall the two case studies in your prepared testimony also cost the taxpayers over $1.5 million. The public deserves, I think, a consistent and reasonable set of regulatory and management controls over oil and gas activities occurring on the refuge system to protect the public surface interest. So first question I have is, do other federal land management agencies manage split estate lands?
There are some instances in the National Park Service, in the National Forest System. Largely the BLM would have a dual estate ownership of this. The Fish and Wildlife Service, again, has entered into some conservation practices by acquiring the least amount of title to a property we needed to deliver our mission. That has meant we probably have more of this split estate situation on a lot of our lands than some of our sister agencies.
And those other federal land management agencies, they have more comprehensive and clearer regulations covering the development of non-federal oil and gas operations. Is that not true?
Yes, that is correct, Congressman.
So that's maybe the National Park Service, National Forest Service, and so forth. Specifically, what does the National Park Service currently require of operations that the Fish and Wildlife Service does not?
They require, in essence,
operators.
They require, in essence, a permit. They require some type of surety bond or safeguard moving forward in case there are damages down the road. They also require the operator to work with them on siting and avoidance and mitigation measures as well.
I think you mentioned in your testimony that many states do not have or have very minimum kinds of surety bonds, that you cost the Fish and Wildlife Service extensive amount of money when a bond, I think it was in the state of Mississippi, was only about $10,000, and the costs ended up being far greater than that. And the taxpayers had to cover that cost. Is that not so?
Yes, Congressman. It can vary state by state. There have been cases where we've had to, and the taxpayers have had to pay pretty significant damages for remediation and cleanup.
Well, I think my colleagues here on both sides of the aisle really care about being fiscally responsible, and so I would hope that any final rule will also keep the taxpayers from being on the hook for the millions of dollars for abandoned oil and gas infrastructure and contamination cleanup. Is that one of the service's goals?
Yes, Congressman, and above all, our goal is that we want to protect the taxpayers and sportspersons' investment in the National Wildlife Refuge System that has been...
Well, thank you. It just seems to me that the service is finally addressing a long recognized problem, a real problem, that the refuge system has repeatedly borne serious degradations to refuge resources from leaks and spills, inadequate plugging, as you pointed out in your prepared testimony, abandonment, which you pointed out, and reclamation. And the service is now taking the necessary steps to apply a consistent and reasonable, hopefully reasonable set of regulatory and management controls over oil and gas activities in the refuge system in order to protect the public's surface interests. I think, in conclusion, that this is acting in a fiscally responsible manner, and I thank you for beginning that process. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes Mr. McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gooden, in 2007, the Government Accountability Office recommended that the service hire 32 refuge oil and gas specialists, 7 regional coordinators,